AM 630.
Good morning, everybody. It's 7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Coming up at 8:05 this morning, we'll be joined by Eli Lake from the Daily Beast. We'll talk about all the national security stuff going on. And then at 8:35, Larry Kudlow from CNBC. It's Brian Wilson alongside Larry O'Connor.
Joining us right now, Susan Ferrechio, Washington Examiner's chief congressional correspondent, talking about, well, let's start with the VA, Susan Ferrechio, as it seems as though there seems to be some movement there in terms of General Shinseki over the weekend, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, freeing up some of the rules at the VA so that some vets can obtain health care at private hospitals. How wide-reaching is this? Is it across the board, or is it just for those vets who have been waiting a long time? How is this really going to work?
Well, it's really interesting because this came after lots of pressure from Congress. Jeff Miller, who's chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, said he wanted to see some kind of privatization for vets who couldn't get help after 30 days. And you heard Speaker Boehner talk in a print interview last Saturday that he still favors the idea of privatization. And then VA Secretary Shinseki came out and said for vets who are unable to get care within the system, privatization will be available to them. They'll be able to go get care outside the system. Now, they didn't really provide any specifics about this, so it's really curious there. How is this going to work?
Yeah.
But I do think this is almost the only way to solve this immediate problem. Think about all the people who are waiting for care, these waiting lists that are going hundreds of days. You know, what are they going to do? You can't reform the system quickly enough to deal with all these people, so it makes sense that for an immediate fix, they would allow these guys out. My question is this going to lead to a broader discussion about privatizing VA? Because there are already, talks in the House about legislation, codifying this into law, so it wouldn't just be this one-time thing. And so it really opens the discussion up to privatizing the VA, which is ironic because if you look at what they're trying to do to the health care in America, which is kind of this march towards government-run care, with the new health care law. And then we have the one system here that really is truly government-run, and they may point it in the other direction and start perhaps privatizing parts of it because it's not working.
Well, and here's my question, though. I mean, how is this likely to play out on Capitol Hill? I mean, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, most people think it's outrageous that people who have gone and served this country are not getting the medical care that they deserve. Is there enough momentum here to push this thing across the goal line to actually make a change up on Capitol Hill?
Well, that's possible. I mean, it's a big question is what will the Senate do? I think certainly in the House, it's run by Republicans. There's all kinds of talk about this, and it's been favored and discussed for years. Mitt Romney, John McCain, Boehner, when he first came to Congress 20 years ago, was talking about this. So there's definitely the inclination. Now, what will the Senate do? I know when before they left last week, they are certainly amenable to the recently passed House bill, which would give the Secretary greater power to fire people. That's certainly not privatization. When you get to go down that road with them, Democrats get very nervous and they don't really like the idea of it. And there are reasons. They point to the head of the certain veterans groups. I think there's a couple now said that privatization isn't the best thing for vets because overall they like their care. They're just not getting access to it. But when they get the care, they like it. Let's face it, who better to deal with combat injuries and some of the injuries that come from service in the military than Veterans Administration? That's their specialty. So the idea of just throwing everybody out into the regular system, I think there's talk of sort of a hybrid system where you could use VA care or get your care using some kind of debit card or voucher system or something in the private sector. I think there could be momentum for that. I really do. It's a question of timing and whether the Democrats are willing to consider that under tremendous pressure, I think, and increasing pressure from vets groups who want immediate answers to this problem.
Susan Ferrechio is our guest, Washington Examiner chief congressional correspondent, and you're covering the story about the IRS and how they're handling employers who are moving their employees into the Obamacare health exchanges. What's the problem with that? I thought that employers had the right to stop offering health care so that their employees can take advantage of that really great Obamacare.
Yeah, this is kind of a confusing story that came out over the weekend. I can kind of clarify it for you a little bit. employers can do whatever they want. If they don't want to give you health insurance, that's fine. Now we have this thing called the employer mandate, though, which means if they don't, certain companies, larger companies, they don't offer you that care, they'll have to pay a fine. So what the IRS did over the weekend was say, look, don't think that you can just dump the employees onto the exchanges and give them a lump sum and have it be tax deductible, and then you'll get out of the fine. That's not going to work that way. You can't do that.
Did we know that? Because I don't think most employers knew that. Was that in one of those things Nancy Pelosi had in the bill?
Or is that one of those interpretations they come up with?
Well, I'll tell you, under current law, that's the rule. Employers can give employees a lump sum to go buy health insurance. It's taxable. So, and that's part of the argument in the whole healthcare law is that, Republicans were saying, why don't we just let people go buy their health insurance and have it be tax-free, as it is with employees? Because if you're doing insurance through a company, it's tax-free. If you're doing this lump sum thing, it's not. The IRS is just saying, look, going forward, it's not going to be either. So all these companies who want to think they're going to do this under the new mandate, you're still going to have to, this is taxable income. So they're saying instead of a lump sum, if you want to, you can't just dump your people into the exchanges on that. You'll still have to pay the fine. If you want to instead pay them a higher income and not offer health insurance, that's fine. That's taxable income. So for the IRS, it's a tax issue. They want to make sure they're getting, you're going to be taxed on this income.
Wow.
So that's really what it is. And I think down the road, you guys, that this does not preclude larger employers deciding in the future when this employer mandate sets in that it's more beneficial for them to pay the fine than it is to offer insurance. And that is still a possibility where people will end up on the exchange. You will say, look, we'll pay you more. We're just not going to offer insurance anymore. It's just more cost effective for us.
And the fine is significant, is it not?
What's that?
The fine is very significant.
Oh, it's huge. The fine is enormous. It's up to $36,500 per employee. So for small
employee.
Yes, for small companies, this IRS ruling that came out over the weekend, it's a big deal because going forward, they thought, hey, maybe I can do this. Well, because this employer mandate is going to be really difficult for us to deal with. No, they can't. And so they'll still be subjected to that potentially huge fine, or the alternative, having to come up with ways to cover their employees, which could be equally, financially impossible for some companies. So you could see layoffs, people deciding not to expand or hire, or going out of business. These are all possibilities.
All right, we've had this incident out in California where a man stabbed some people, he shot some people, and he ran over some people with a car. But there's already seems to be a few people calling for gun control in Congress. Do you think it's going to have any momentum?
No, yeah. I mean, this invariably there'll be a discussion, in Congress when there's a terrible, terrible incident like this, and there should be, I think. And one of the things I think you'll hear everybody talk about is the mental health issues, how we're dealing with the root causes of this. Because don't forget, this young man, I think he stabbed people as well. And he used his car as a weapon. I mean, he was all around, just path of destruction. And I think gun control will certainly be part of the discussion. But like in the past, there's just no way it's going to go anywhere. It's certainly not an election year, you guys. They're not going to move an inch on gun control right now. I don't see it ever really happening. I see mental health being part of the discussion with potential for action. But I don't see any real movement on efforts to control clip sizes or types of guns or regulating who can own them.
All right, Susan Ferrechio, got to leave it there. Thanks as always. Susan Ferrechio, Chief Congressional Correspondent from Washington Examiner.